New devlog time it is.
These videos follow the development journey for Penumbra Tower, a grid-based roguelike where the player has to navigate through randomly generated floors of the Penumbra Tower, defeating enemies and traveling deeper within. If you haven't seen the previous devlogs in the series, I'll quickly run through all the work that has already been done, but if you want more lore, check out the previous devlogs. I started by creating a grid generation script that instantiates a room with different kinds of tiles in it. I instantiated a player and a random amount of enemies on specific segments of the board. In the player controller, I added a simple single tile movement method to the player using a raycast on mouse click. I drew a sprite for the player in Krita and added in an original rat sprite from the previous game as a basic enemy for now. I created a method for simple single tile movement on the enemy's AI controller based on the player location. We created a game manager to control simple turn changes between the player and enemies. I wrote a combat script for both player and enemy attacks. And with that, I added text to display the damage numbers. Then I worked on a more advanced movement behavior for the enemies based on the targeted direction and inherited behaviors. And finally added tile highlights for the movement patterns. And that's a really basic summary of the last 3 videos. Maybe I'll do a recap like this every 3 or 4 videos or so. A key aspect of game design is thematic consistency, where every aspect of the game follows a guideline ensuring that all elements look like they belong in the same world. I'm at a bit of a crossroads thematically for where my game is headed, so I wanted to get some opinions from you, the community. So should this game follow a general fantasy setting where the enemies, for example, could be goblins, orcs, skeletons, spiders, you know what I mean? Or should the theme of the game follow more closely to the frog theme, where all the enemies would be some variant of an amphibian or animal that a frog would encounter? Could be bugs, fish, birds, predators, that sort of thing. I think there are pros and cons to both options, mainly being that leaning more heavily on the frog theme would make the game more unique, but also might limit the amount of options that are possible. Anyways, let me know in the comments which of the 2 themes you think would work best, or if you have another idea completely. Okay, so there's a couple of things to go over in today's devlog, mainly regarding movement still, but it is what it is. And it's like, I know, movement again. Didn't I just cover this in the last video? Well, yes, but the video only covered AI movement behaviors. Now we gotta handle the player. Take a look at this. In the last devlog, we added multi-action movement behaviors to the enemies, allowing them to travel a single direction for multiple tiles in a single turn. Very cool. However, the player currently sucks, kind of. It can only move a single tile each turn, meaning it will take 1 to 2 turns to be completely surrounded by all the enemies that spawned. But what if we could add in an additional level of player choice while also resolving this problem? So the goal of this is to make the player feel like they have more control over the amount of player movement that they have, while also giving them some decisions to make. The way I decided to do this, while also adding some RNG in, is with cards. A ton of roguelikes use cards already, not that this is necessarily a bad thing, but later on in the video I'll explain why this really doesn't matter. Okay, so cards. At the start of every turn, the player will draw 3 cards. And after thinking about this for a while, I decided that the cards would use anywhere from 1 to 3 actions each, and would also contain a random movement pattern. I also considered adding attack modifiers to the cards, but chose to tie that to the player progress instead. Also, yeah, the cards look pretty ugly right now. I literally just added a UI image and put the movement behavior icon with the actions number into a vertical group on top of it. So now, when the player starts a new turn, they should start with 3 total actions. This means that if they draw 3 cards, each with 1 action, they can use all 3 cards that turn. If they alternatively draw 2 1-action cards and 1 3-action card, they won't be able to use every card in their hand. Makes sense, yes? So whenever a new turn starts, the player will need to decide where they want to move or attack, and if they can do that action safely with the cards they've been dealt this turn. When I started working on this, I didn't imagine the amount of edge cases that I would need to work on. You need to think about what happens to your hand when the turn ends. How does the game calculate if you've ran out of total actions and can't use any of the remaining cards? How does a card look and behave if you don't have enough actions to use it? What happens if you do use a card and then click on another card immediately after? There's just a lot of bugs to fix with this. And here's the part where I'm depressed. Let's talk about whether this is a good or bad addition to the game. I have one big problem with this new system. While it does solve the original problem of allowing the player to move in an interesting way, it also slows down the flow of the game to a crawl. And if me, the person who created the system and fully understands how it works, thinks it feels slow, it's going to feel even slower for somebody else. Pretty much, it takes too long between each turn to look at your total actions, to look at your card's actions, look at the card's movement pattern, look at the enemy's movement pattern and the enemy's actions, using a card, and then doing the same exact thing for the next card until you've run out of actions for that turn. For me, it just doesn't feel good to play. Obviously, if I had known the result would have turned out like this, I wouldn't have implemented it, but sometimes you need to develop and test a feature to find out whether it works or not. And because of this, I'll most likely remove the cards from the game in favor of something else. I may keep around some of the card functionality. For example, the cards could be used as item pickups between floors, or maybe inside of a shop. But regarding player movement, I do have another idea in mind. So every couple of videos, I want to start answering questions regarding the game. I feel like most of the time, I probably don't explain certain details about the game well enough without realizing it. So if you have any questions regarding any aspect of the game, leave a comment and I might include it in one of the upcoming devlogs. So for this video, I'll just cover one question from the previous devlog. Do the blue tiles represent special conditions? Yes. I'm planning on having at least one type of hazard tile randomly placed in each room. Currently, the only thing being randomized is a water tile, which currently doesn't do anything, but the plan is to have lava tiles, water tiles, poison tiles, spike tiles, ice tiles, and each of these types of tiles could apply a status effect to a unit if it's stepped on. So, if you step on a poison tile, the player would be poisoned for maybe the next 3 turns. And this would lead to some player decisions on whether or not it would be better to tank an attack from an enemy, or the status effect from moving tiles. Okay, so you might be wondering what actual progress got made between now and the last video, if I'm removing the card system that got implemented. And you know, sometimes it's not about the progress, it's about growing as a game dev, and it's about the friends that we made along the way. Also, I did animate the player sprite.